Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about pitching. So this is a very popular topic for startups, right? And you're not just pitching investors, you're usually pitching a lot of different people, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So what is boss, right? What is that? That colloquial American expression, like a boss. All that means is to have confidence. And how do you have confidence? You need to know what you're doing and what you're talking about, okay? So I'm going to try to give you some of that confidence. So first of all, who and why are you pitching? Do you ever ask yourself that? What do you want from them? The first people you'll be pitching are the people closest to you, your family, your friends, to let you do this crazy startup thing, right? And you have to get them on board for it to happen, for them to support you. If you can convince somebody of your idea, that's called a vision. If you can't, that's called a hallucination, all right? So let's talk about the different types of pitches that you will have in your startup career, right? And a pitch is a special type of story. You're telling a story, and that story has a call to action. You want people to do something right now. You want them to act. You want them to give you money. You want them to join your team. You want them to buy your product, etc. That is a pitch. Very, very simple. You learned earlier how to close. Well, let's talk about what happens before the close. So in your startup career, to be more specific, you're going to have 3 different types of pitches. The first is a 90-second elevator pitch. And your call to action is simply to get the meeting, right? So the number one mistake is you trying to cram 2 years of your life and all of your ideas into 90 seconds onto somebody. And they're not going to respond. They're not going to memorize all this information. So you have to pick 1, 2, 3 things for them to simply want to hear more and give you that meeting, right? Think about that. Very, very simple. It's like poetry. You have to choose your words. It's all about psychology. What do they want to hear? What do you need to tell them to give you more time? Why is it called 90-second pitch? Because in New York, in tall buildings, a long time ago, it took about 90 seconds to get up to the top, and that's how much time you had to pitch an executive to get your idea heard. So the second type of pitch is the 3-minute public pitch or demo day pitch. You're going to hear 10 of those today. And here you have 2 different calls to action. First of all, you might be in the middle of 10 companies or in the middle of 30 companies, and everybody has a lot of different things going on at a conference or demo day. First thing you got to do is stand out. Every person in the audience is going to remember 1, 2, maybe 3 of those pitches. You have to become one of them. So you're competing for that attention. And then, of course, the second part of it is to get that meeting again. So again, you have to say less, because the less you say, the fewer words, the more impact each word is going to have. So you have to be very, very selective, and you have to edit for what you're going to say. Now, if you're successful with the first or second type of pitch, you may get that 20-minute meeting. This is the 20-slide meeting. This is the conversation. And your goal here is to get the deal. This is when you actually sell and close as a startup. Until then, nobody cares about your financials. Nobody cares about what we plan to do in 5 years. They want to hear the customer and the problem and how you're going to solve it. Excite them and get that meeting. So let's talk a little bit about the content of that, let's say, 3-minute pitch. Actually, each one of these, this 90-second, no slides, just conversation, the 3-minute on-stage pitch, or that long meeting, they all have the same content, just various forms and lengths of them, right? We're talking about startup presentations. So let's talk a little bit about that. First things first, if you have traction, lead with traction. Nothing matters more than traction. If you come into a meeting and you open your pitch with, we have 1 million users, each one's paying us $1,000 a day, and we're growing at 100% a month, I do not care what your product is. I will write you a check right there and then. So if you have traction, you have to lead with it. You're obviously not going to have that kind of traction, but depending on your business, you have to pick and choose some vanity metrics, some things that are impressive, that are showing that people are responding to your product. They care what you've built. Now, at different stages, you might have different kinds of traction. But this is also a very important signal to an investor or to whoever's listening on the other side to understand what stage your company is at. Right? Different investors look at different stages. You heard from Ari, he's looking as an angel, he wants to see certain things. Venture firms will want to see different things. Bigger venture firms that write bigger checks are going to want to see different things still. So you have to very quickly indicate where you are really and kind of excite somebody with numbers, saying, look, we're growing, we're progressing. Right? So if you have it, you lead with it. Now, the next thing, and the first questions that I ask anybody that comes to me and starts pitching, and I see hundreds of startups every year. I travel the world, over 20 countries a year, do a lot of mentoring, so I hear a lot of pitches. And people just dive in right into their technology, talking about, well, we built this thing, and it's great, and we're on this platform. It's like, I don't care. Pitch me the problem. Who's the customer? What's the problem? That's what you start with, right? What you move on to next is talking about that this is not an inconvenience, right? What you're building is a painkiller, not a vitamin, not a nice to have, but a must have, something that will fundamentally change the way they work. Even if you're working on something really technical, you need to be able to turn your pitch into something that a smart, educated person that might not know your industry needs to understand about your product, okay? About the industry you're working in. The way you make it obvious is by showing evidence. I don't know you, but I know Gartner or some other research firm. Talk about numbers, talk about the industry. Point to experts in the industry that I trust, right? Until you have your own proof. Now, there's always, if it's a real problem, there's always competition. There's always a way that is being solved. The nice thing is that with every generation of technology, you have a new way to solve the same old problems. So the next wave is maybe wearable computing. So you can solve the same old problems in different innovative ways that are more convenient, etc. The number one mistake that any young entrepreneurs that are inexperienced or first-time founders, they'll go out and say, well, we have no competition. Ha, 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 ha. Aren't we great? Well, guess what? If you have no competitors, there's no problem, there's no market, there's no product. Goodbye. So never say that on stage, never say that to an investor. There's always a way, if it's a real problem, there's always a way it's being solved right now. Maybe it's email, maybe it takes a lot of time, but somebody's working on it. There's some way it's being solved. Now that I know who's the customer, what's the problem, how's it currently being solved, and why doesn't it work, now tell me your solution. Now I have the context to understand and try to judge quickly whether what you're working on is interesting and will make an impact. Does that make sense? Now, you have to be able to compare yourself very quickly, and it's not going to be a grid of checkboxes. It's going to be very specific and very simple ways. How the current way people are solving this is hard, expensive, pain in the ass, and how are you different and better? Not just we're totally different for the sake of being different, but different and substantially better. That's obvious to anybody. That's what you have to get to, and make it very, very simple. Better, faster, cheaper. You can follow that up with a quick demo. Now that I know who's the customer, what's the problem, how's it currently being solved, why is it lacking, what are you doing different and better, now show me a demo. What does it look like? That can be 3 screenshots. 1, 2, 3. Customer signs up, then they get this, then they get that. Now I understand your product. Now let's talk about the market. Now they understand who's the customer, what's the problem, how's it currently being solved, why is it inadequate, what are you doing different, what does it look like? Okay, now show me a $1 billion market, right? And show me that that market is growing. Why is this important? If you're going into a big existing market, you have to fight big established companies in a stagnant market that already own it. If you're coming into a new market that's growing 20% a year, guess what? You're going to grow with it, almost no matter what you do. And it's much easier to get new customers than it is to take customers away from big established companies. It's much cheaper, much faster. Okay? This is why growing markets are so interesting to investors. Then you need to have some idea of a business model, right? So there are 2 different types of business models. There are symmetric business models where a customer pays for the experience. It's a subscription, it's a product that you purchase once, etc. Right? It's very simple. I solve your problem, you pay me for it, one way or another. That's B2B, that's software as a service, That's a mobile app that you download, etc. There are asymmetric business models. These are the advertising-driven business models. This is Facebook. You are the product. You spend hours a day on Facebook, and Facebook sells hours of that time to advertisers. Somebody else pays for it. That's great if you can make that work, but know that that's very, very difficult, and you need a very large audience for that type of business model to work. So in a lot of developing markets where it's really difficult to raise any kind of serious investment money, it's going to be very difficult to get to that type of size. That's why a lot of these markets focus on B2B, where you can start generating revenue much faster. Make sense? Now, does it scale? This is the question between a lifestyle business, where this will always be a 5, 10, 20-person company, and the next Facebook, Google, etc. And what does that mean? Usually, it's the question of how much revenue per employee, right? So now McDonald's does about $64,000 per year per employee in revenue, but they have 1.6 million employees. On the other hand, we have Craigslist that does about 3.6 million revenue per employee per year, but they only have about 23 employees. Right? The sweet spot is somewhere in the $1 to $2 million per year per employee type of range. So this is also a very important test. When you're pitching investors, they know these numbers, and if you have some hockey stick slide that shows that you're going to be the fastest growing startup in the history of startups, and in 5 years you're going to be making $100 million per year per employee, it's obvious that you don't know what you're doing, and you have some business education to get done before any investor will talk to you. So keep that in mind and know what you're shooting for. Be realistic. You have to have a connection to internet-driven customer acquisition models. It's a huge advantage. It's much cheaper and much easier to create a startup today anywhere in the world because of this than it was to create a startup in Silicon Valley in 1999. None of these platforms existed, right? So use that to your advantage and know how to do this. Invest a lot of time and effort and all of your resources into online marketing and learning how the distribution platforms work. And when you raise money, set aside most of that money for marketing. It will always take a lot longer and cost a lot more for you to get those customers. Now, early on, your team is the most important asset that you have because you have nothing else, right? Until you have substantial traction, then that question is pretty much mute. But what does your startup team have to consist of? You guys know this shape? I use this slide everywhere, but I think it's a little more relevant here, yeah? So first of all, you need to know the business that you're getting into better than the average person. Because no investor wants to pay for your 2-year education to learn an industry. You need to know the problem that you're trying to solve. Usually by working in that industry and knowing it from the inside, right? You need to be able to sell. Now, engineering. If you're in a software business, you cannot outsource your core competency, which is writing software. You have to be able to write software. Right? Maybe you can get the first prototype done by a partner for equity or something, but you cannot keep doing that. You're going to give away 100% of your company very, very quickly that way. And of course, design is very, very important. All your customers, all your users know is design. They don't care if it's Java, .NET, PHP, Scala, etc. They do not understand the magic of programming, nor do they care. All they care about is the 15 seconds when they download that app, and is it engaging, does it solve the problem, or is it confusing, and I'm just going to delete it and move on with my life. So pay attention to design. This is not something you add later. This is something you start with. What is your unfair advantage? You need to think about what is your unfair advantage. And I'll give you a hint here. It's not being light. It's about being strong in this case. So you want to demonstrate. And it's usually very early on going to be your team. That you have some special knowledge that nobody else has or very few people have. Okay? And when you're pitching, this is not the time to be modest. This is the time for you to really, really advertise yourself. So talk about your accomplishments as a company. Have you raised money? Who did you raise it from? That's a very important signal. And of course, talk about partnerships, not because they'll bring you all the money, but because that will prove to an investor that a big company in the industry spent their time and resources and decided to work with you. That's a validator. That's very important. And the most important thing is always growth. Before you get to profitability, only invest money into things that will directly lead to growth. User growth, revenue growth, etc. Now, how do you behave when you pitch? We'll go through this real quick. First of all, your slides, as you notice, are mine. I am the presentation, right? My slides are not there for you to read them. They're just there for you to have a visual cue of what I'm currently talking about. So the best slides are always on the news, right? The over-the-shoulder graphic, that's the best slides in the world. So there shouldn't be a bunch of text. There shouldn't be any bullets. Bullets kill people and presentations, right? So keep in mind, you are the presentation. Now, since you are the presentation, your body language is crucial. And I'll give you a few quick hints that you should keep in mind that will improve your presentation. So, first of all, confident stance. Confident stance is this: feet shoulder length apart. Right? There's a normal thing called parasympathetic response, called fight or flight, and there are very simple things that people do that are dead giveaway that they're nervous. And it's usually body wrap. They do this, right? Or they'll stand kind of uneven, and they'll look nervous, right? I can be not saying anything, and I can be confident on stage, or I could look nervous, right? Or they'll pace on stage. They'll just walk around for no reason because they're trying to run away. They're afraid, they're nervous, and that's how they're showing it to you. So keep that in mind. And by the way, you have to have your presentation, all of your materials so well remembered that you can focus on your performance when you're presenting, okay? Now, what you're doing, and I do a lot of this, is open hand gestures. You don't want to point at the audience, right? That's kind of accusatory. It doesn't feel good. But you want to extend your hand, you're like shaking somebody's hand. So when you're using open hand gestures and you gesture at people, that tends to work. You're having a dialogue, right? Speak loud and clear, right? So I'm on the microphone now, but I can very easily talk nice and loud if I didn't have a microphone. And everybody in the back is not going to look at their phone. They're going to look at me. And you have to train yourself to do that. Right? You always have to be nice, loud, and clear. And when you're speaking in a foreign language, a second language, English is technically my second language, but I grew up with it, you need to be able to be very clear and remove extra words. Remove extra words, speak simply, etc. Don't read your slides. Don't ever do this. Nobody wants to look at your ass while you read the slides that you should know. They want to look at your eyes and have a dialogue with you, right? And that's what you're doing. You're only talking to eyes. So when you get nervous, you know, there's about maybe 200 people here, a little less, but it doesn't matter if it's 20,000 people or 20 people. The trick is you don't imagine anybody naked. That's kind of silly. What you're doing is you make eye contact with a person and you deliver them a line, a phrase. You make eye contact with another person and you deliver them a phrase. This will slow you down to a normal conversation pace that anybody can understand. It'll make you less nervous because you're talking. It doesn't matter if it's 20,000 people, you're having one-on-one conversations with everybody. Does that make sense? And that's really it, right? Is that it's a series of one-on-one conversations. And at the very end, the most important thing is smile. Right? Nobody wants to talk to some angry person on stage or somebody that's yelling or something like that. They want to have a nice, pleasant conversation, and this is how you engage the audience, where they talk to you instead of to their phone. Right? And that's kind of the kiss of death. If you're pitching an investor and sitting there, used to be BlackBerries, now it's iPhones. But sitting there and reading their email, go, yeah, this sounds great. That's very interesting. Okay, thank you. So you want to have a conversation. So when you're on stage or you're sitting one-on-one, you want to have the same effect. That's about it. If you want the slides, we'll actually post all the slides on SlideShare. So we'll tweet them out from our main Twitter account, CCC Startups, and Startup Adventure hashtag. But you can follow me personally, and I'll share mine as well. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day.